dense forest, carrying with it the scent of pine and the deep, earthy smell of wet leaves. The moon, full and bright, cast a pale light over the clearing, illuminating the small, weathered cabin nestled at the edge of the woods. It had stood for decades, a quiet witness to the passage of time, its walls thick with the stories of the woman who had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. Her name was Alma, an old woman who had never married, never known the joy of children, but had always shared her heart with one creature, one very special, very large creature, an enormous wolf. Unlike any other the villagers had ever seen, Alma's life had been one of solitude, but it was a peaceful solitude, made comforting by the presence of her loyal companion. They had been inseparable, the woman and the wolf, and it was said that no one had ever seen the wolf without Alma by her side. Nor had anyone ever dared to approach the wolf without feeling the strange, powerful force of its gaze. It was a gaze that seemed to pierce through the very core of a person, making them feel as though the wolf could see their deepest fears, their hidden thoughts. But despite its size, its ferocity, there was something gentle about the way the wolf treated Alma. The villagers had long speculated how Alma had come to raise such a beast. Some said the wolf had been an orphaned pup she had found in the woods one cold winter night, its family slaughtered by hunters. Others whispered that Alma herself had a strange connection to the wolf, that it had been more than mere coincidence, that such a massive creature had wandered into her life. Whatever the truth, the bond between them was undeniable. The wolf grew with each passing year, its fur dark as midnight, and its eyes a piercing amber that glowed in the moonlight. The villagers would speak of the way the wolf would follow Alma on her walks, silently keeping watch as she gathered herbs or tended to the small garden behind the cabin. It would sit by her side as she worked, its massive head resting on its paws, watching the world around them. Despite its intimidating size and powerful build, the wolf was gentle, almost tender, when it came to Alma. It was a protector, a guardian, and in return, Alma cared for it as she would a child, feeding it, soothing it when it growled in its sleep, and speaking to it in a language only the two of them understood. Years passed, and Alma grew older, her bones aching with each passing season. Her hair turned silver, her steps slower, but her bond with the wolf remained as strong as ever. The villagers, who had once whispered in fear about the wolf, had come to respect the creature. They knew it would never harm anyone, so long as Alma was near. They would leave her to her solitude, to her quiet life with the giant wolf, knowing that she and the beast shared a rare, almost mystical connection. But nothing lasts forever. One bitterly cold winter evening, Alma did not return from her walk. The villagers searched the woods for days, calling out for her, but there was no sign of her, no trace of her footsteps. It wasn't until a week later that they found her, lying peacefully in the snow near the edge of the woods, her eyes closed as though she were merely sleeping. wolf, however, was nowhere to be seen. For days, the villagers waited, hoping that the giant wolf would return, but it never did. They held a quiet funeral for Alma, the woman who had lived alone, but never truly been alone, the woman who had given her heart to a creature of legend. The old cabin stood empty, the wind now howling through the open windows, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of the trees. Life returned to normal in the village, and Alma's passing, though mourned, was soon forgotten by the younger generations. But deep in the forest, the legend of the giant wolf lingered, whispered from one elder to another. They would say that the wolf had never truly left, that it roamed the woods at night, its golden eyes glimmering in the moonlight, searching for its lost companion. What the villagers didn't know, however, was that the wolf's journey had only just begun. The beast, powerful and untamed, had stayed hidden since Alma's death, waiting, watching. It had not wandered far from the cabin, for it knew its place in the world. But there was something more, something Alma had entrusted to the wolf, a final promise that had not yet been fulfilled. As the moon rose full once more, casting its silver light over the snow-covered ground, the wolf emerged from the shadows of the forest. Its giant paws left no trace in the snow, its body moving silently through the woods, a shadow among shadows. The world had changed, but the wolf had not forgotten. It had never forgotten its bond with Alma. It had been waiting, as wolves do, for the right moment, for the time when it could honor her final wish. Alma had spoken to the wolf in her last days, telling it things the villagers never knew. She had entrusted the wolf with a secret, a mission, and though her body was now gone, her words had not vanished. The wolf's journey was not just one of grief or loneliness. It was a journey of duty. Alma had asked the wolf to protect something far more precious than the woman ever let on. The moon was high in the sky when the wolf arrived at the clearing near the cabin, where the earth seemed to hold its breath. There, beneath the snow, lay a small bundle, wrapped tightly in a blanket. The wolf approached cautiously, its amber eyes glowing in the night as it lowered its massive head. It sniffed at the bundle, its breath clouding in the cold air, and then, carefully, it began to unwrap the blanket. Inside, hidden beneath layers of fabric, was a tiny, trembling creature, an infant. A baby, no more than a few months old, with dark tufts of hair and soft, round eyes that blinked up at the wolf. The wolf's heart, vast and ancient, seemed to soften, and in that moment, it knew what it must do. Alma had raised it, cared for it, and now the wolf would raise and protect the child, as it had once been raised and protected. It would keep its promise, a promise made long before the world had known of this child's existence. The wolf gently lifted the child in its mouth, its massive jaws careful not to harm it, and carried it through the forest, deeper and deeper into the wilderness. It knew where to go, for Alma had spoken of this place in the final days of her life, a hidden valley where the world was still, where time seemed to slow, and where the bond between the earth and the creatures who roamed it was stronger than anywhere else. There, in that secluded valley, the wolf would raise the child as Alma had raised it. The child would grow up surrounded by the wolf's pack, taught the ways of the wild, taught the ancient wisdom of survival and loyalty. The wolf would be the guardian, the protector, and the child would learn to be strong, to stand with the creatures of the earth, as Alma had stood beside the wolf all those years. And so, under the glow of the moon, the giant wolf vanished into the wilderness with the child, never to be seen by the villagers again. But legends of the giant wolf persisted. Stories passed from generation to generation. Tales of a creature that had guarded a secret, a promise kept, and a child raised with the love and strength of both a wolf and a woman. The legacy of Alma, the old woman who had raised the giant wolf, lived on through the child who would one day return to the world, to share the bond between humans and wolves, and to carry on the love that had been passed down from one generation to the next. The wolf's journey had not been one of sorrow, but of honor, of duty, and of an unbreakable bond that death could not sever. The wolf had fulfilled its promise. The days and nights in the hidden valley passed with a quiet, serene rhythm that only nature could create. The trees were ancient, their roots tangled deep in the earth, reaching back to a time long before humans had walked upon the land. The valley was untouched, a sanctuary, far removed from the prying eyes of the outside world. Here, the giant wolf found peace, its massive body now at rest after the long, arduous journey through the snow-filled wilderness, carrying the small child, still wrapped in the blanket. The wolf knew that it had to ensure the child was safe, for this was its duty. Alma's last words echoed in the creature's mind, a constant reminder of the bond they had shared, the trust that had been placed in its massive paws. The child, no more than a few months old when first found, had grown, but even now, its small eyes still held a flicker of wonder and curiosity, as if trying to make sense of the world around it. The wolf never left the child's side, watching over it with the same devotion that had once marked its life with Alma. Each day, the wolf would lead the child through the valley, teaching it how to walk with the rhythm of the earth, how to breathe in the air with an awareness of its surroundings, as if the very wind itself carried ancient secrets. The valley seemed to come alive for the child, blooming with color in the spring, ripening with fruit and vegetables in the summer, turning golden with the fall leaves, and embracing the icy, quiet stillness of winter. The child grew stronger, its legs more sure beneath it, its eyes sharper, catching every movement of the wolf and the other creatures that roamed the land. In time, the child learned the ways of the forest, its innate connection to the wild growing stronger with each passing day. It would laugh as the wolves played around it, their graceful bodies leaping through the air with a joy that was both wild and carefree. The The child would touch the wolf's fur, its hands small and tentative at first, but slowly gaining confidence as the bond between the two creatures strengthened. The wolf never spoke, but it did not need words. The silent language of the wild was enough to communicate all that was needed. It would guide the child with gentle nudges, lead it to water, to food, to shelter, and would always protect it from harm. The wolf's fierce loyalty to Alma was now translated into an unwavering sense of duty to this child, this living legacy of the woman who had raised it. But as the years passed, the world beyond the valley continued to turn, and the forest itself began to change. The villagers, those who had once known Alma and the giant wolf, had forgotten. Their memories of the old woman faded, slipping away like whispers in the wind. The tales of the giant wolf became nothing more than stories told by the oldest among them, stories that seemed too strange, too unreal to believe. They spoke of a time when the wolf had been a guardian, a protector of a woman's heart. But those stories were lost to time, buried in the sands of memory. Yet, in the deepest parts of the woods, the wolf's legacy lived on, and so did the child, now no longer a baby, but a young girl. Her eyes were no longer filled with the innocent wonder of a child, but with the sharp, knowing gaze of someone who had seen the world through the eyes of the wild. Her hair, once dark and soft, now bore the wildness of the forest itself, untamed, flowing in the wind like the branches of the ancient trees. She had become a part of the valley, as much a creature of the wild as the wolf that had raised her. Her footsteps were as silent as the wolf's, her body as fluid and graceful as the creatures that roamed the land with her. She had learned the language of the trees, the language of the wind, the language of the animals. She was no longer a child. She had become a force of nature, much like the wolf that had cared for her. But still, the wolf remained a constant in her life. It was her guardian, her protector, her companion through the changing seasons. Together, they moved through the valley, their bond unbroken by time. And though the girl had grown, she had never forgotten the stories Alma had told her during her early years, the stories of the world beyond the valley, of the human world that was so different from the wildness she now called home. Alma had spoken of the beauty of human connection, of the importance of love, of friendship, of the ties that bound people together. She had told the girl that one day she would leave the valley, that one day she would have to find her own way in the world. And though the girl had listened to those stories with a sense of wonder, she had never quite understood what they meant. She had been content in the valley, content with the wolf and the wildness that surrounded her. But Alma's words lingered in her mind, a constant reminder that the world beyond the valley existed, and that one day it would come calling for her. It was during the harvest moon, when the air was crisp with the scent of autumn, that the girl first felt the pull. It was as though the valley itself was calling her, urging her to return to the world beyond the forest. The wolf sensed it too. its amber eyes watching the girl with a mixture of understanding and reluctance. The time had come. The girl would leave. She could feel it in her bones, in the very marrow of her being. It was time to take the step that Alma had prepared her for. It was time to find the place where she belonged, to step beyond the boundary of the valley and into the human world. But the girl hesitated. The forest had been her home for so long, the wolf her constant companion, that the thought of leaving filled her with a deep sorrow. She had never known anything other than this life of peace and solitude, where the only thing that mattered was the rhythm of the earth, the cycle of the seasons, and the love she shared with the wolf. The wolf, sensing the girl's inner turmoil, approached her with a slow, deliberate gait. It nudged her with its nose, its warm breath brushing against her cheek, and the girl looked into the wolf's amber eyes, finding the strength she needed in the depths of its gaze. The wolf had never led her astray. The wolf had never abandoned her. And now, in this moment, the wolf was telling her that it was time. It was time to leave. It was time to step into the world that Alma had prepared her for. The girl nodded slowly, her heart heavy, but filled with a quiet determination. She took a deep breath, and as she did, the world around her seemed to hold its breath too, as if the valley itself was waiting for her to make her decision. With one last look at the wolf, the girl turned and began her journey toward the edge of the valley. She could feel the weight of the wolf's gaze on her back, and though she would be leaving the safety and the peace of the valley behind, she knew that the wolf would always be with her. The wolf's legacy would live on in her, and the world beyond the valley would never be the same. As the girl moved toward the edge of the valley, the heavy weight of her decision settled in her heart. Every step felt as though she was walking further away from everything she had ever known. The warmth of the valley, the cool embrace of the mountains, the soft rustling of the leaves, and the constant presence of the wolf, all felt like memories she was leaving behind. Yet, as she ventured deeper into the unknown, she realized something profound. The world beyond the valley, although unfamiliar, was not as distant as she once thought. She carried the legacy of the valley within her, the lessons of the wild, the wisdom of the forest, and most importantly, the unwavering love and loyalty of the wolf that had raised her. The girl's footsteps, though uncertain at first, grew more confident as the landscape began to shift. The trees thinned, and the land opened up to reveal the first glimpse of the world beyond the forest, the vastness of the world that Alma had often spoken of. It was not as she had imagined, for the world outside the valley was a complex and bustling place. Yet, there was something beautiful in the chaos of it. In the midst of towering buildings and crowded streets, the girl could feel an undercurrent of something she had not expected, a sense of connection, a longing for something greater than herself, just as Alma had described. As she wandered through the streets of the town nearest to the valley, the girl was struck by the diversity of life around her. There were so many people, all with their own stories, own dreams and their own struggles. She could hear the conversations, the laughter, the arguments, the silence, all of it so different from the stillness of the valley. Yet, in the noise and the bustle, she felt a strange sense of belonging. The girl did not know it then, but her journey was just beginning. Each new person she encountered, each new place she discovered, was a piece of a puzzle she had yet to understand. But even amidst the confusion and overwhelming newness, one thing remained constant: the memory of the wolf, its amber eyes always watching over her. The giant wolf had not followed her into the town. It had remained in the valley, perhaps understanding that its time with the girl had come to an end. Yet, the wolf's influence was everywhere the girl went. She found herself walking with the same silent grace it had taught her, her senses sharpened by the time spent in the wild. She could hear the rustling of leaves, the distant murmur of a stream, the hum of the earth beneath her feet. It was as though the valley still whispered to her, guiding her steps, just as the wolf had always done. Days turned into weeks, and the girl settled into her new life, though it was a life that seemed to exist in a constant state of tension between the world of the wild and the world of the humans. She found herself drawn to the animals that roamed the streets, the dogs, the horses, even the wild birds that perched on rooftops. There was something about them that reminded her of the valley, of the wolf, and of the life she had left behind. Yet, despite her connection to the animals, she felt a growing sense of loneliness. No matter how much she tried to blend in, to become a part of the world, she could not escape the feeling that she was different, that she was apart from the rest of them. Her mind would often wander back to the valley, to the towering trees, the rustling leaves, and the wolf. She longed to return, to feel the earth beneath her paws again, to experience the quiet of the valley and the companionship of the giant wolf that had given her life. But each time she thought of returning, she remembered Alma's words. "You must make your own way in the world, my child." And so she stayed, determined to honor the memory of Alma and the lessons the old woman had taught her. As the years passed, the girl, now a young woman, found herself standing at the crossroads of her life. The world around her had changed, and yet she had not. She was still the same person who had once wandered the valley with the wolf, still the same person who had once laughed at the beauty of the wild. But now, she was something more, something shaped by the experiences she had endured, the challenges she had faced, and the people she had met along the way. The world had become her canvas, and she was ready to paint her own story. Yet, even in the midst of all the changes, she could not shake the feeling that there was something unfinished, something calling to her from beyond the world she had come to know. It was then that she received word from the valley. A messenger, one who had known Alma, came to her with a letter. The letter was short, but it held within it the promise of something that would change everything. "The wolf is waiting for you," it read. "It is time to return." The girl's heart leapt at the words. was as though the valley itself had called to her, summoning her back to the place where it had all begun. Without hesitation, she packed her belongings and set off, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew that she could not ignore the call, for it was not just the wolf that was waiting for her. It was the life she had left behind, the legacy of Alma, and the wild world that had shaped her into the person she had become. As she made her way back to the valley, the landscape seemed to shift around her. The trees seemed to grow taller, the air felt fresher, and the earth beneath her feet seemed to hum with energy. When she finally reached the edge of the valley, she was met by the wolf. Its massive form loomed before her, but its eyes were no longer filled with the fierce intensity that had once marked its existence. Now they were calm, knowing, filled with the wisdom of years spent guarding the valley and its inhabitants. The wolf had aged, its fur graying in places, but its spirit remained as strong as ever. It did not need to speak to convey its message. The bond between them was unspoken, a connection that transcended words. The girl knelt before the wolf, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch its fur. "I'm home," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The wolf nuzzled her gently, and for a moment, the two of them simply stood there, in the silence of the valley, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the weight of all that had come before. The wolf's tail gave a slight wag, as though acknowledging the return of its beloved charge. It was time for the girl to become the guardian now, to take her place in the wild world, to protect the valley and all that it represented. The wolf had fulfilled its duty, and now it was time for the girl to carry that legacy forward. The valley would continue, untouched by the hands of time, a place where the old stories lived on, where the magic of the wild was preserved for future generations. And as the moon rose high above the valley that night, the girl and the wolf stood together, united by the bond they had shared and the legacy they would leave behind, a legacy of love, loyalty, and the deep connection between all creatures of the earth. The world had changed, but the heart of the valley, the soul of the wolf, and the spirit of Alma would endure forever, passing from one generation to the next, like the glowing light of the moon that watched over them all.